Hi, this is Bob DeGemis. I'm president of the Redline Athletic Club in Rockville, Maryland. Today is May 1st, 2020. I'm going to give a little bit of a presentation, sort of long form, about where we are as a club, where youth sports are, and where the higher levels are, and how that's going to affect youth sports. Obviously, things have changed dramatically since February of this year. How youth sports are able to operate this year is going to be very different, and coming back, it might be a year to 2-year process. For our small club, we're kind of fortunate because we are small, we're local, we're seasonal, and we're flexible, but big sports institutions like college athletics, professional athletics, the Olympics, the Little League World Series, and all sorts of sports institutions are going to have to change rapidly and don't necessarily have the nimbleness that we have. Fortunately, this is sort of an opportunity for local youth sports, amateur sports to shine and show why they have a great place for kids to play. We'll start off with a little bit of history. This isn't the first time this has happened in sports in the last 100 years. 100 years ago, plus 1-2 years, something similar happened. Obviously World War I occurred, and then the 1918 Spanish pandemic, and it affected hockey greatly. Hobie Baker, who our top collegiate player award is named after, was in World War I, and died 1 month plus after Armistice Day in December of 1918. But the pandemic didn't stop in 1918. It kept going all the way to the beginning of 1920, because the following year in 1919, the Stanley Cup, at the end of March, between Montreal Canadiens and Seattle Metropolitans in Seattle, was canceled after 5 games. In fact, almost all the players ended up in the hospital. One player died, and the cup was not awarded after the 5 games. They were not able to complete the series. So that was the last time until the lockout of 2004-2005 that the Stanley Cup was not played for. So it was a serious issue, but here we are 100 years later, and sports have come so far in 100 years, and making changes on the fly is necessary. So back to our own local club, because we're small, we're local, accessible, flexible, we're sort of able to make the changes that need to be changed, and we have a little bit more time than most. The trend for the last 30 years was playing year-round, or the vast majority of the year. So those with spring, summer, fall programming, have a really challenging few months ahead of them, whereas we typically don't get going until the fall anyways. We'll still be affected, but we have a little bit more time to make changes as necessary. The Aspen Institute think tank has a youth sports program, Project Play, and they've been monitoring very closely how youth sports will be affected by the pandemic and how sports will look in the next year to 2 years. And they put out a good article yesterday called "How Will Youth Sports Return to Play?" And the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee issued the first national guidelines to help sport organizations return to play, a phrase that you're going to hear a lot of in the foreseeable future. And the U.S. OPC has 5 phases. We're sort of in the beginning phase of returning, but there's still a long way to go. And these phases look like this, and we'll post all of this up in written format as well. First phase occurs when the shelter in place is required, where most of the country is right now. Includes training that should only be in an athlete's home using his or her equipment. Phase 2 happens when a community lifts shelter in place requirements but continues to prohibit group activities, and public training facilities still remain closed, so rinks, etc. some states are entering this, but we're still far away from the whole country being in phase 2. Phase 3 occurs when group activities of less than 10 are allowed. So this is like it was back in March, small groups, perhaps outdoors, with folks that have no signs or symptoms of COVID-19, and have tested negative for the virus. Stage 4 is when health authorities allow public training facilities to open. So this is when rinks open, with no limitations on group size. And this is something we'll get to in a moment. I'm going to talk about another article that speaks more specifically to hockey, but that's number 4. And then phase 5 is the end game, when a vaccine is developed, which might be 12 to 18 months at the earliest. The takeaways from that article that I see the most is that risk varies by sport. It depends on whether it's indoors or outdoors, whether it's individual or team, whether there's equipment that's touched by both or more than one participant. So high-risk sports include wrestling, boxing, judo, karate, rugby, things where people are running into each other. Moderate risk includes basketball, volleyball, baseball, soccer, gymnastics, hockey, tennis. And then the lowest risk would include golf, skateboarding, skiing, and snowboarding, things of an individual nature. One of the recommendations from that article, that's something that we pride ourselves at Redline, is that this Dr. Maria Elena Battazzi from the Texas Children's Hospital Center for Vaccine Development suggests keeping sports teams hyper-local, at least initially. Well, that's Redline Athletic Club for you. We are hyper-local, and keeping our group, our small group together. There's another piece that was called Minor Hockey. Life Might Look Very Different this fall, is from British Columbia, and it got into more specifics about how rinks might have to change their procedures in order to operate. So these suggestions or premonitions, if you will, included that arenas with more than one sheet of ice might have to be reconfigured to allow separate entrances at each surface. So that means that the lobby area would be closed off. So it had 2, 3, 4, 5 sheets of ice. You'd be going directly into that rink, not through the common area. Increased arena staff, which would be greatly increased for cleaning and disinfectant. Hand sanitizer dispensers everywhere. Arenas will need to schedule longer gaps between ice rentals. So if there's a rental from 3 to 4, you might need a half-hour gap until 4:30 in order to do cleaning, make sure everybody's out, and then have another ice session. Arenas will need to offer reliable video streaming for parents. Great. This is already sort of happening with a rink barn. And never mind the surveillance stuff. That's already sort of becoming a common practice. Arenas will need to mark off socially distant viewing spots for what people watching have to do. Dressing rooms will have to be reconfigured, if even used. No out-of-town tournaments. This will affect the most affected will probably be travel hockey. Out-of-town tournaments, players in hotels and sharing pools and stuff like that, and big mass gatherings in rinks is probably going to be another year away. No barbecues, post-game team meals, tailgates, etc. Players will likely have to arrive. This is something that a lot of Redline people do anyways. Players will likely have to arrive for ice 10 to 15 minutes early, fully geared up except for skates, which means that there are no pregame dressing room chats and no pregame drills and warm-ups. A lot of people at Redline do that anyways. They kind of dress in the common area and are spread out. So it's almost, we're already sort of ahead of the game. After games, players will change from skates to shoes, go home fully geared. More practices, fewer games. 1 to 2 coaches on the bench with masks. Masks might become part of the deal. Perhaps shifting from 5-on-5 play to 4-on-4. reducing roster size, body checking being cut, spectators limited to team officials only, mandatory COVID online training for all coaches and officials. The coaches are probably going to have to do some more training, and they do a lot of work as it is, and they can expect some more. I'm sorry to hear that, but it just is. Parents testing kids' temperatures before every game practice, it would be super helpful. Limiting call-ups, this is something that Redline does a lot, and we might have to cut that practice, but limiting call-ups and keeping the same group of players together. Strict water bottle protocols, this is something we talk about anyways. Glass, eye-tech shields rather than cages might be something that needs to be considered. And then washing of gear and jerseys, and disinfecting all sorts of pieces of equipment, even sticks, is something that everyone's going to need to take a look at. This is going to affect all of our hockey at Cabin John, Wheaton, the clubs around us, Montgomery Youth Hockey, and will probably affect us. So if a limited number of players are allowed on the ice at a given time, say 30 to 50 players, that's going to limit the size of the programs. We already have a limited amount of ice in DC, and big clubs like Montgomery Youth Hockey, I can't imagine, are going to be hamstrung. This might mean that we get some players that might otherwise be playing from there, but at the same time, because the group lessons have stopped, we're probably not going to get a lot of players that are coming from the bottom, new entry players. So how it shakes out is to be seen, but those are some of the things that I think that we're going to see coming down the road next year. We'll do another one of these in 1 month on June 1st, and we'll take a look at where we're at then and what decisions have been made by MNC PPC and other hockey governing bodies. All right, until next time, stay healthy, stay safe, and be sure you're outside practicing your rollerblades. All the best.